Welcome to the May 15, 2025 meeting of the Downtown Design Commission. My name is Justin Brannon. I am chair of the commission. The agenda and documents are located at https://okc.primegov.com/public/portal. You would then select the Downtown Design Commission meeting and click on an agenda item, and the relevant documents will come up below that item. Please see the agenda for additional information regarding meeting procedures and the review process. If you're parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex Elementary or in the Arts District parking garage south of City Hall, staff can provide a parking violation ticket to you. Keith, will you please call roll?
Brannon.
Here.
Copeland.
Here.
Black.
Here.
Kidd.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. Item number 2, approval of minutes. If there are any questions or comments on the minutes from last month, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Copeland, second.
Okay, motion passes. Item number 3, cases withdrawn, there are none. Item number 4, continuance requests, there are none. Item number 5, consent docket, there are none, but I think that Katie has something that she'd like to present before.
Yes, I just wanted to mention this briefly. I was going to talk about it under items from Planning Department, but thought it'd be better to do it while there's actually people in the room, because this is for our attendees as much as for the commission. Planning Department is proposing some fee increases that are anticipated to go to council this next Tuesday for introduction. They are for a wide range of things that Planning Commission reviews and administers, but specific to our design review committees, we would be increasing some of the fees and also kind of restructuring and creating a tiered structure for our commission review fees to have a difference between smaller items that typically take less staff time and larger projects that are more demanding of our city resources. So administrative approval fees would go from $200 to $250. Commission review with no new construction involved would stay at the current fee, which is $750. Commission review for new construction under 20,000 square feet would go to $1,000. New construction between 20 and 100,000 square feet would go to $1,250, and then over 100,000 square feet would go to $1,500 for the review fees. An email will be going out to kind of our cast of thousands, we call it, our stakeholders and applicants, people that we work with frequently, and all of this will also be on PrimeGov in the City Council agenda when that gets posted.
Okay, thank you. Item number 6, case for individual consideration. We have DTCA-25-00011R1 at 400 Southwest 15th Street. Laura?
Good morning, Laura Griggs, Planning Department. In case you haven't been down South Walker lately by the river, the north part of Wiley Post Park is currently being renovated. This was administratively approved by staff a few months ago, but there's one aspect of the project that requires it to come to you because they want to put parking lots in with pavers and they have to get a variance for that. So this gives you the rough idea of where it's located between 15th and the river. And it kind of goes all the way over to Shields. And then there's that interesting exit onto 15th that goes off the side, and that's being eliminated. If you've gone by there, you see it's blocked off and the road's been taken out. So this gives you a rough idea of where those two parking lots are going to be. There's one here on the west and one over on the east. The Public Works Department has signed off on the pavers, and so we typically defer to them as far as the construction type for parking lots. So obviously these pictures were not ones that I took last week, and it was grassland several years ago. They had gone in and taken out a parking lot that was there that you might recall we used to always end up with the semi stacked in there waiting to go to the feed mill. And then that's looking at Shields. So when you go out there now, you'll see that it's all been scraped and they're actively working on that. And there is some development in the area. This is in the corner of 15th and Robinson. And then obviously it's directly across the street from Lower Scissortail Park. And I'm going to stop there because we have a presentation for them. So as I said, the only reason you're having to see it is because they want to use pavers for the parking lots, and they need a variance from the Board of Adjustment, so you all will have to make a recommendation on that. I included all the regulations dealing with parking and the paving from Chapter 59. So, as I stated, most of this work was administratively approved by staff, which is why they're out there working right now. So the Public Works Director actually has signed off on the project. Her signature is on the very first page that you probably saw that was attached with the application. And planning staff, as I said, typically defers to the Public Works Department relative to paving, alternative paving issues. And so the staff recommendation is recommendation of approval with the condition that they get the variance, and then you would also have to make a recommendation on the variance itself to the Board of Adjustment. Do you have any questions for me?
Okay, no questions for our staff? Okay, would the applicant like to speak on this?
And if you wouldn't mind just printing your name, you don't have to fill out anything else. Is he going to show this? Here.
Hello, I am Jeff Evans with PDG, the designer for this project, lead consultant. We also, as you see logos on the bottom right, had CEC Engineering and GH2 Architecture on our team to design this. This is a space there on the north side of the river, as was pointed out. What we're coming to you today for is the use of brick pavers in the parking lot to match what was done on the south side of Wiley Post Park on the south side of the river. So these have been used within the park, just the south side does not fall within the downtown design review. So some elements of the park here, there is going to be an amphitheater in the park. You see some of the architectural renderings. This was from preliminary design. Probably didn't want to see black and white drawings. These are a little bit more fun to look at. The site itself, you can see the parking lot there on the left-hand side is one that will utilize brick pavers to match the exact design on the south side of Wiley Post. And then on the east side, we'll have a multi-use event area overflow space that will be utilizing a brick paver as well, just a little bit different design on that. The park itself, just design-wise, you can see right in the middle of it, there's a big void. That is where the USS Oklahoma Memorial is going to go for the submarine. To the left of that, the amphitheater, so that they can use that as event space too. Playground areas, plazas that look out over the river, parking, restroom, or not restroom facility, a pavilion facility, a smaller pavilion, and then underneath the bridge there will also be some playground facilities, trying to engage that space with the trail going through there. Some of the other architecture throughout it and spaces, this is one of the larger pavilions. This is one of the smaller pavilions and designs of those that will be around the site. Some of the river lookout that will be there through design, just so everybody knows, the stairs have gone away because the grading worked out that we did not have to do those when we originally thought we would. And then it will have some structures along the river too. And that is pretty much it. We did provide some renderings of the playground equipment that will be utilized on this. These are some renderings from the manufacturer. There'll be some berms, natural colors to blend in, some 2 to 5 area, 5 to 12 area, the structure that's going to go underneath the bridge. So some fun elements. And then here's a design of the parking spaces that are on the south side of the river in Wiley Post Park, and this is going to be the same design that we would utilize on this side.
Okay, perfect. That was actually my first question, was going to be, there wasn't a delineation between using the asphalt versus the pavers on what we saw, but that's helpful. So it would be just like this?
It'll be exactly like that.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions? Okay, is there anyone else that wants to speak on this item in the galley? Okay, am I entertaining a motion?
Yeah. I'm excited to see the north side of Wiley Post Park be developed. It's been a really big vision for the Parks Department, so it's exciting to see it come to life on the north side. So I'm going to make a recommendation to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the condition that the applicant obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustments from the regulations requiring hard surface pavement for parking lots.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a second
A
motion?
second, to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustments for a variance from the regulation requiring hard surface pavement for parking lots.
I'll second the motion.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, next for individual consideration, we have DTCA-25-00020 at 330 Northeast First Street.
Hello again. So this site, I believe only one of you up there on the Horseshoe was here in 2018, the last time we saw this, and none of you should have been on in 2013, the first time this came forward. So this is over in Deep Deuce, and I'll just run through. It's a vacant lot that is at Russell M. Perry and First Street. And ironically enough, the day that I was out taking pictures, it's hard to see, but right down here, there was a huge bus with a huge trailer attached, parked on the street. But I was just going to point that out. And so this is looking south toward Bricktown, and any reference to the hill, that is what you see over on this side. And then looking back to the west, as you can see, Devon Tower. There is also some residential development immediately north across First Street from apartments or this, and then we also have single-family houses that are being built. And that's adjacent to the west. It's a small office building, and then that is their parking lot. And I'm going to go back here. So as I stated, the first time this came through for a hotel was back in 2013. And at that time, I was not here then, so I'm having to base this off of staff reports and minutes and emails that I found. The item was continued at the hearing because of opposition at the meeting, and subsequently, the owner withdrew the application. But back in 2018, it came before you. There was a lot of people that showed up to speak that day. It was a very long meeting. Ultimately, the project did get approved with several conditions. And I included those conditions in your staff report. That project was never constructed. So on the current application, what I included in the staff report is they will need approval from the Traffic and Transportation Commission, possibly City Council, for the proposed drop-off valet area, as well as the set-in parking spaces that they're showing along First Street. And so I have a condition included in case you are so inclined to approve this project so that we can capture that requirement. I would also included a comment you guys have seen from us before, which is when you have a sidewalk that goes across a driveway or the drop-off area, we don't have it in Chapter 59, and eventually, hopefully, we will have it. So that we make the comment that they need to demarcate the sidewalk in some way because it takes priority. It can be color, texture, it can just be the lines on either side. So that is a comment that you've heard from us before, and we have a condition addressing that included in the recommendations. The sidewalks are required to be a minimum of 5 foot unless it's adjacent to a curb, and then it is supposed to be 6 foot. And I have a condition because I couldn't really tell. There were some areas that were not dimensioned, so I just wanted to cover all bases with that comment. During review, I had looked at the plan and said you're going to need a variance because your trash truck's going to have to back out when it pulls in. But they provided me with a drawing showing that the trash truck would be able to back up on site and not have to back up on the street. So they don't need a variance from that. And that drawing was included with the application in your packet. So there is a need for a variance on this project because they're proposing a sign at the corner, which is in the right-of-way. It's within the streetscape, but technically it's within the right-of-way. There's a prohibition of signs in the right-of-way. You've seen some come before you recently for signs in the right-of-way. I included all of those regulations as well as guidelines addressing signage. The sign itself, there isn't a problem with size or height or anything at all because it's being put on, it's like a planter wall that they're putting in. It's going to be concrete. So I did include the tables that show the sizes that are allowed from the new sign code. So there are, as I state, there are several things that they're doing on this project to activate the streetscape. They've got seating, they're doing planters, and this sign is going to be on one of the planters. So to me, it wouldn't necessarily look like it's in the road because it's within the sidewalk, and most of the time people don't realize, yeah, the sidewalk is actually within the street right away. I would not anticipate the proposed location to cause any issues at all. It wouldn't be a distraction to drivers, and it would just be something the pedestrians would notice as they're walking down the street. They're also proposing to have a canopy over their drop-off area, and they're proposing it to extend into the right-of-way. We have a guideline about how a canopy is supposed to stop at least 18 inches from the back of the curb, and so I've included that in here. That all would be part of what Traffic and Transportation Commission would be looking at. We typically don't have actual encroachments like that into a street right-of-way from a canopy or awning. However, when a drop-off valet area is provided for a hotel, they typically would extend all the way out to where the cars are dropping people off. And we had discussion of that when the Omni came in, because they did encroach into the right-of-way with a lot of the stuff they did. So staff has included the recommended conditions that I referenced previously about Traffic Transportation Commission approval, the sidewalk demarcation, and the variances from the Board of Adjustment. And then if you do approve that, you would also need the recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. And do you have any questions for me?
Kim? Any questions for staff? Okay, would the applicant like to speak on this?
Let me get to that.
There you go. Yeah, good morning. David Box, 525 Northwest 11th Street, here on behalf of the applicant. So, as Steph said, this was one that was approved, kind of conceptually the same type of product years ago. When we sought to file this again at the request of Laura, we went and met with the neighbors. She referenced the lengthy hearing, the amount of people that were here last time. So we went and met with the neighbors at the Hill, and it was a very productive meeting. Most of their concerns dealt with the lack of parking and what that might mean for their neighborhood. What they discovered, I think, which I think is evidenced by no one being here, is that this particular developer has relationships with a valet service and active contracts within the area so that it's, we think, clear there will be no problem with parking. Of course, in downtown, there is no parking requirement. With what we propose through valet, we believe firmly that we will provide no adverse conditions within the neighborhood. Additionally, what we were able to do was connect the neighborhood with the people that run the valet service to remedy some past mistakes that had happened. To our knowledge, there have not been any follow-ups on our end, which I think tells us they were hopefully able to establish some communication and fix the problem. So we have a team full of people here that are able to answer any questions you have on the design aspect. This is, I think, a lot that is significantly underserved that will be a wonderful addition to the area and hopefully a wonderful addition to the neighborhood that exists to the east. So happy to answer any questions. As staff said, there is a requirement that we get a variance. You can see the signage right there on that planter box. So we would ask for your approval on both the design aspects as well as a recommendation for approval to the Board of Adjustment on the sign. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay.
Not a question, just a comment, because I do think that a lot of the things that we talked about last time have been addressed, and I greatly appreciate the fact that you reached out to the neighborhood, and I agree. The fact that there's not a big conversation to be had is exactly what we want to see, so I do appreciate that.
Any other comments? Is there anyone in the gallery who wants to speak on this item? Oh, you did.
And she had one copy of a handout, and I'm going to have to make copies to get to
Sorry.
everybody.
Yeah, it's from another homeowner. I've never done this before, so if I'm going to ask all my questions, and then if I'm supposed to do something different, just tell me. So I'm Diane Ming. I'm a neighbor at The Hill, Russell M. Perry, and wanted to note that we did appreciate the dialogue that they had with The Hill, and the design brand quality is good, although the boutique hotel is a step up in height from the Hyatt Place, which is just south of there. So just kind of wanted to note that. But so I think the main concerns, even though they've addressed the valet, and I didn't hear in the conversation that if the valet is required, because right now there's parking, but every night at the Hyatt Place, it's taken up with those people. And so if in the evenings, and then people go to Bricktown and there's just no parking, and which means they're gonna encroach into the neighborhood for all their parking, and pretty soon it's going to be extra full. Right now, that's usually not the case. It's mostly on Russell M. Perry and First Street. So I guess my question is, are they going to make valet required, which would alleviate that concern? And then, let's see, hold on. There's also a valet lot across from, it would be south of this, the Tempo, and then it's west of the Hyatt, and that gets very full on the weekends, like completely full. So I don't know how all that works, and if they have like designated amounts of spaces they're going to be required to reserve for the hotel, because I think I read somewhere 148 rooms, so there could be a lot of parking that's needed there. And then I didn't know where the employees were gonna park, if they're included in the valet next door or something like that. And then we're just wondering the consequences, like who do we call, or what happens if they're like, oh yeah, the parking's not gonna be an issue, but then it does become an issue. And if there's any recourse for that. And, and just so you know, there's a lot of people, there's no parking signs there right now, and we've been calling the police for years, I guess, because people just ignore the do not park here or you're gonna get ticketed sign, and then once they start ticketing, then it kind of calms down and then it goes back up again. And then I don't know where they're going to stage their construction. Is that gonna be on the right of way? That's another question, is for construction parking. And then finally, if they have pets allowed, what they're gonna do for dogs and their waste, because we have some areas in the Hill that we have bags for our own personal dogs, and some green area like right across the street. And if you looked at their depiction, I did not see any grass, so I don't know what their plan is, or if they're gonna say no pets. So those were my main questions. And just an aside, they did just finish up a really nice sidewalk around that whole corner here, like a month ago. that we've not had in the 10 years that I've lived down there. So that's interesting, and that'll all be demolished. But anyhow, that's it.
Thank you. I'll see if we can get the applicant to address those concerns.
So, as it relates to parking, I mean, there's a couple things at play here. The Hill is made up of public streets. This is not, I mean, I live in a historic neighborhood. Parking on the street is always a complaint that people have. The rub is, of course, public streets are open to the public to park. One of the suggestions I had to the neighborhood group when we met, and I can't recall if she was there, but because of the unique nature of the Hill, it might, behoove them to hire someone to go seek to close and vacate those streets, gate them, make them private streets. There's a hesitancy to make streets private when it's a natural grid and connects to other areas. If you look at what the Hill is, there is no connection to other developments. The Hill is a kind of self-enclosed neighborhood. It would be ripe for a closure and vacation action to make it private. Now, with that said, the group we have doing our valet, we are absolutely confident that there is enough volume with the contracts that they have to adequately support valeting of all the cars. Additionally, this particular brand is a higher end brand, and it's one that if people were to be driving to this facility, you would expect to valet, just like you would in any other kind of big city. When you go to a hotel, you expect a valet when you're at a nicer end hotel. It's a very different brand than what exists to the south, where perhaps people wouldn't expect a valet. This particular line, I would expect everyone would be anticipating having to valet their car. So we're confident that the valet service provided will adequately handle the load here. In terms of where exactly construction parking will be, I'm not sure that that level of detail has been worked out. We're happy to get the contact information for her and put her in contact with our folks. So as we move towards construction, we can get her that information as necessary. If there are any additional questions, we're happy to address them.
Okay, a question for you. So with this tempo, is there another level, like hotel level, that's in the downtown that that is owned by the ownership group? And do we know statistics on, who is parking versus who is Ubering or who is doing rideshare? Or is there any type of that statistic that would be helpful to us or to the? Okay.
Not in terms of the statistics. Now, in terms of, is there another kind of on-level brand downtown?
Sorry, James Lacey, with the architect team. I would say AC, maybe the Renaissance would be similar level of brands. So
Yeah, I think it would be
clientele.
helpful
That'd
to
be
just. I think it would be helpful just to kind of have that stat of, hey, we have X amount of percentage of people who actually don't use our parking, just so we can kind of ease the neighbor's mind.
I'm Justin, so I'm with the operations team for Aston. We do own the Spring Hill Suites downtown. It's not nearly as upscale as the Tempo.
Yeah.
I did, however, open the Renaissance, which is very similar. It's right in the heart of Bricktown, and we have no parking. It's valet 100%. Never had any issues. When we met with the HOA, we kind of explained all this to them. I don't believe she was present there that day, but we won't run into resistance at all. And you're not going to have very many people who even want to self-park. They don't want to go through the hassle. When you're coming to stay at a property and you're spending $250 a night, you don't want to go find free parking 15 minutes from the property. Our guests are going to want to stay with us. And we can't require anybody to use a valet. Like if they decide to tell us they're not parking, whatever, we can't force that. But my experience in the past was like 95+% of people, if they're driving in, they're going to be parking with our valet service. Sorry.
Just so we spell it right.
Any other?
And the one thing to clarify that I know there were questions about requiring parking from the resident that lives across the street. So as you all are aware, in the Downtown Design District, parking is not required. Each version of this hotel had something different. The last one that got approved had parking garage was part of it. This one, as you saw on the site plan, had for a few valet spaces, which I would assume is when they get backed up, they have room to put the valet spaces there until somebody can move them to whatever parking lot they're moving them to.
Oh, can you
said
also,
I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead. Can you
As a
also,
city, I don't know that we don't want parking. I mean, my daughter had gymnastics meet recently in Tulsa. We stayed in a very high-end boutique hotel in Tulsa with a parking lot attached to it. You know what else is attached to it? Other parking lots. You know what else you didn't see? People. You saw tons of parking. I could park anywhere. You saw no activation. You saw nothing. We don't want to be like, we don't want parking. We want buildings. We want activation. We want people. We have adequate parking, and the valet service will be able to utilize that to make sure that here you have the site filled with a property where humans are.
Can you also speak on if there are pets allowed?
With the what?
Can you also speak on if there are pets allowed?
Yeah, so I'll do further research on that, and we'll exchange information when this is done. But we cannot refuse service animals, so there'll definitely be something, and it'll be something that we should consider too. So
Okay.
we'll probably have some area designated for that.
Okay.
The abandoned railroad right-of-way looks like a perfect place to me.
Okay.
I don't see that this is not in our jurisdiction to discuss the parking side of things, right? Because they've got a plan, and if their plan is successful or it fails, there's a different mechanism to address whether or not the valet is performing. That's not ours. We're looking at the packet as presented, and am I not correct? We're going to review this on its merits. You're going to be held to the standard, and with respect to construction, the city's going to give you guidelines for how construction is going to, road closures or anything that's going to impact you. They will hold the contractor responsible for doing it in accordance with city ordinance. I like the density. I love the absence of parking. I do think that there's positives and negatives to everything. I like this. I'm in support. I am going to be curious what Eric might say.
I have two concerns, and it all has to do with the public right-of-way. The first is I'm not seeing an accessible route from the valet drop-off to the front door of the building, which we know once you go through traffic and planning commission, they're going to require you to have an accessible route, ramp up onto the sidewalk. And turning radius, I know it's quite sloping on that north-south street, so it's going to be a tricky spot for you to get your ADA ramp. I would want to make sure that if after we go through traffic and the permitting process for all of your public right-of-way work, if it reduces street trees, it has to come back to us for approval. The second thing I'll say about that is I don't believe in your street trees. You've shown red buds, not really like a street tree.
So, and I actually was going to comment to them, but redbuds are on the list when it's because of overhead power lines, and we have overhead power lines along both streets, because I was hoping for a different tree.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it could be more like a lower maple like we've seen on
Like a
Third.
Shantung maple would be a great choice.
Something that would limb, yeah.
Because we'll put whatever trees you want us to put there,
Yeah,
to be
because
honest with you.
a red bud will get fried if it's by itself. It's an understory tree.
I would be glad to discuss that with them. Or I could pull it out now and we could go over what's on the list of ones to be planted within 10 foot of overhead power lines, if you want.
Does that satisfy?
I think the red bud is not inappropriate in this location, and I have an expert on the board that will tell us the correct species of tree.
Whatever she says. In terms of ADA, we can't get a permit if we don't comply, so we're.
Yeah, completely agree. I just know I've been through that process with them, and it's painful.
Sure.
And they then start to grow how much scope you need, and so in the process of doing that, I don't want to delete a street tree.
Sure. We'll have adequate street trees, whatever Ms. Copeland tells us we need.
Would you like to make a recommendation of what tree?
I would recommend a Shantung maple.
Okay, so do you want me to check and see if that's on the list?
It is on the list.
On the list? Oh,
I'm
okay,
pretty certain.
that's fine.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Are there any other questions, comments Is there anyone else that wants to speak from the gallery again? I think we have a different person.
Hi, my name is Mike Ming. I live in the Hill, and I know there's been dialogue with the homeowners association at the Hill and the project, and I think we at the Hill have appreciated the dialogue with the project developers. And we know this project's been an evolution from an early design. That early design was a boutique hotel, which it was a so-so boutique hotel. This is a nicer design. We're very much in support of a nice project here. My comments relate to the reality of the operation of the project. It's not a boutique hotel now. It's a big hotel. It will actually be, according to what I look at on the plans, it will be a higher profile, a higher physical height than the surrounding hotel. So it's a major impact on the neighborhood. And the reality, you may or may not have jurisdiction over the parking, but the reality is what we see every day living at the Hill. And I look out my deck, and almost every day I see people dragging suitcases from the Hyatt up to our neighborhood where they park because they don't want to put their car in the valet across the street. And if this is a 300-room hotel, there's going to be people that do that, okay? 150, but that's still a lot of people, and there's employees. So one of my questions is, who's actually going to be accountable if this hotel floods the neighborhood with lots of extra traffic? So, well, the rules are this. Well, I can tell you along Russell and Perry, south facing, there's a whole string of signs. They say no parking at any time. People park right under the sign every week. They don't follow the rules. They don't care. And unless someone calls the police, who the police are actually pretty responsive, they give them a ticket and then they don't park there for a little bit and then they're back parking. So there's going to be employees that work at the hotel. There's going to be guests that don't want to valet park. There's going to be impact. So my comments are, we support this project. We want to see a nice development there. It will help the neighborhood, but there has to be a recognition of the realities that people are going to do what people do, and it's going to impact the neighborhood, and it will impact the Hill. And it's hard to see the parking issue just being pushed off. This is a pretty big deal, because that valet lot that's across from the Hyatt now on the west side of Russell and Perry, south of the right-of-way, it's quite often completely full where it's double parked in there. So there's a convenience factor there. So I would urge that if there's a parking plan, which it sounds like developers have worked hard on this, we appreciate that, there's got to be an accountability factor. And if it really doesn't work out when we're done, I mean, from start, it's going to be construction workers, and then it's going to be tenants at the hotel. If it doesn't work out, what's the recourse? Who's accountable? And who do we call? So I would urge all of you to take this into consideration because it will impact the neighborhood. And like I said, this looks like a good project. It looks like it enhances the neighborhood, but we just have to be mindful of the realities of how people operate.
From the standpoint of our review, our comment on recourse for something like this is they need to work out something that is in accordance with the ordinance of the city. They need to be in compliance. They need to understand that if compliance is not being held to, that they know the path to ask for that compliance to come back into play. But it's not really for us to define a compliance plan. And then on just a separate note, today's not the day where we're reviewing a parking lot on a corner inside of a residential neighborhood. But when that comes up, this room is full of the neighbors who don't want parking lots in their front yard, backyard, side yard. And so I do think that this, I agree with you that the actions of the developer and the owner in keeping this is vital for the success of this. I think that it's really going to be good for you to understand how to make sure that they stay compliant, because it might be up to you and the neighborhood and a coalition of individuals who will make sure that that continues to work. I don't know that even if we were to put something on paper, if they're going to ignore the sign and park under it, they're definitely going to ignore the piece of paper that was 2 years prior. So is there a path to understanding how to adhere to compliance from the city standpoint, so that they actually have a vehicle to impact change?
We go by the code, and the code does not require minimum parking in this area, so that's not grounds to deny this for. As for who to call, the obvious answer would be the police department. They're the ones that enforce the parking ordinances. Beyond that, there's nothing really else that this committee can do about the parking situation.
So go back to the original proposal for a boutique hotel, which would have far less parking intensity issues. I mean, that was the original proposal some years ago. And what I'm hearing now is it's just a bigger project and the code says they don't need it, which is somewhat strange to me because office buildings require a certain number of parking spaces.
Yeah,
No building in Oklahoma City requires a certain amount of parking.
Not in the downtown, not in the district, not in the downtown design.
Okay, so it's just unique to this defined area.
Correct.
The concept is if you don't take care of the parking that your patrons are going to require, your business will fail. So it's really incumbent upon the developer to make this successful as well.
Yeah.
Yes, there are things that need to be adhered to, and there's probably, I don't know if you've got a governing body, an HOA or something with your development, but if there is, enact some policies and some procedures to make sure that the requirements of your neighbors are adhered to for the success of both the neighborhood and the development.
Yeah, and I hear you and I understand the reality if that's the reality. Having lived there 10 years, I can see what's going to happen. I have guests come over, they can't park in the pull-out parking in front of our house because it's completely full 24/7 from cars. And the reality is street parking actually may not be a huge issue because the people from the Hyatt may have already taken all the street spaces. That's just the way that they operate. So maybe it's not a problem we can solve. I wanted to go on the record that the developers here have made a commitment to this, and we'll see how it plays out. We want to see this project, but we also want to be mindful of the realities of the way that people operate. So I appreciate all your time and the dialogue with the developers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
So can I seek clarification? There were 2 comments made about street trees. One was if any street trees proposed to be removed, you want it to come back to the commission. And the other was replace the street trees with Shantung maple. So are those 2 conditions that you want to add?
Come back to the commission to request permission to plant a tree?
No. If any street trees are proposed to be removed, because this still has to go through Traffic and Transportation Commission, and there's minimal street trees proposed. I think there's 8, maybe? Normally, we would get more than that. And I had just heard.
I think there's 8 street trees proposed. It seems completely consistent with the scale of the lot. That's correct. I'm worried that during permitting, Public Works is gonna say, no, in the public right of way, I need more maneuvering space for ADA, you need to delete this street tree and this street tree. And I think there's still enough room to have all 8 street trees around here. So all I'm trying to say is, if in the process of getting your permit, you revise your public right of way in a way that deletes street trees, I'd like to see it again.
Could that not be that it's on the condition that all 8 remain,
Sure.
period? And then there is no comeback because 8 street trees needs to be provided.
And then they would just work with staff if they have to be relocated.
Yeah.
Would that work? Would
I
that
think
work
that's
with you?
fine.
Okay.
If it gets less than that, we would come back, but
But you do want a condition to change the street tree to Shantung maple, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a much better,
Okay.
it'll be more successful tree for y'all too.
sure.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the condition that the applicant obtain approval from Traffic and Transportation Commission and City Council if necessary for the proposed drop-off valet area and set-in on-street parking spaces, that the site plan be revised prior to the issuance of certificate of approval to show the sidewalk demarcated across the driveways and the drop-off area by color, texture, or lines at each edge of the sidewalk area, and that the applicant obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the prohibition of signs in the right-of-way, and that the species of street tree gets changed to a Shantung maple, and that, that the quantity of street trees will remain at 8 for the property.
Copeland second.
That motion passes. And then,
And I'd like to move to
what?
provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for variance from the prohibition of signs in the right-of-way.
Copeland second.
Thank you.
okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, next we're on to DTCA-25-00023 at 716 Northwest 6th Street. Laura?
Hello again. This is a site that some of you might, I'm trying to think, remember from 21 was the last time this was before you, and it was going to be a small boutique hotel with cabanas and a swimming pool. And that project was approved but never constructed. So the site has remained vacant across from, I still refer to it as Valier, even though I think it recently changed names, the rehab hospital that is directly north. So a variance has already been submitted for the required variances for this project, and I did include that information. I can't remember the date of that, but it's not today. So the proposal is to install some prefabricated units, and I'm just going to, as you can see right now, the site is vacant. You see off in the distance to the south, there's a fence that's along the alley. And looking back, what's on the corner is the Bell Bonds place, and that's adjacent to this. So this is the fence along the alley. And this is looking west down 6th, so the subject site is to the left. It slopes from 6th to the south. And then this is looking back to the east, and the subject site is on the right. And the Bell Bonds is on the corner, as I mentioned. And then adjacent on the east side is a parking lot that's used by Valier. And then that is immediately north across 6th Street. And since I'm showing this, although you can't see it very well, I was able to confirm that they did get their fence in around the generators that you guys approved recently and that they had to get variances for. One of them is over in this corner, so they did follow through, and it is now behind a screen. So let me go back to here. So as I said, they're proposing to put some prefabricated structures on the site. You might notice that on the label that is on the site plan states that it's going to be an ADU show homes. All different types of residential and commercial lodging uses are allowed in downtown, and we don't have an ADU use unit. That ordinance, as you're aware, it hit a hiccup, so it's still at council. I think it comes back hopefully next week, if I remember correctly. So we reached out to the applicant and their representatives and said, here are the various use units. Please pick one, and they chose commercial lodging. So we're looking on this like it's a hotel. But to me, this is more like a long time ago when it had little cabins, or not like the hotel that we just approved. So I wanted to point that one out. So the proposal is to have 5 individual buildings that would be the hotel rooms that people would stay in. They are also proposing to have amenities just for the people staying there. There's a swimming pool, there's a bar, there's a gym, there's a laundry area, and an office, and that's all just for this project. It is not for somebody walking down the street that wants to stop in and have a drink. And then they're going to be including parking along the alley. So right now, there's a fence on the property line. There will be a new fence, but it will be moved to the north, and they will have the required distance. And the parking spaces would just pull in from the alley, and you are allowed to back directly out onto an alley, unlike you cannot back out directly onto a street with parking. So this proposal is going to need some variances. And so what I discuss in this first one is we have the minimum heights, and then we also have the maximum setback. And the maximum setback applies to all of the primary structures. And so I'm looking at that as the 5 hotel room buildings, as I call them. And so I've included the regulations that talk about first 2 floors of new construction have to be placed at or within 10 foot of the street right-of-way. And also the fact that they are allowed, they are required in DTD 1 to have a minimum height of 2 stories or 30 feet on all street frontages. I mentioned in here about accessory buildings, and they don't have to meet the minimums. It's possible, because there's going to be so many different structures on the property, that we will end up with the feel of the density and/or intensity that we desire in downtown. And I say possible. But staff is concerned about the precedent of approving a 1-story project at this location. The applicant has indicated that this would be a temporary project, and we don't typically have projects come before you that are temporary. I have Scenic River, we did some for some temporary classrooms at some schools, and they got approval for a time frame, and then they had to remove them. So it's not something that we usually see, and one of the reasons is it's kind of hard to enforce that. So with either staff has changed, or we use a different permit system, or the different things like that. And so trying to get a handle on that is kind of difficult. However, the applicant is suggesting that this be temporary. What I will say is what I landed on a date. And I heard from them after I landed on the date, and we're going to discuss that here with them because they want it to be longer. I didn't ask them before I landed on a date, so that was on me. I probably should have. So we will be talking about that one. So another thing that I discuss is there is the guideline requiring front doors to be oriented towards the street, and this project is totally internally oriented because of that is just the way they've designed the project. It's oriented toward the amenities, the pool, the bar, all of that. So the other thing is structures are proposed to be prefabricated off-site. And one concern we have is we really don't want it to look like a collection of temporary buildings. Or when you look at the drawings and the way they, when you look at the elevations, and they look really short, and then they have a certain shape that it's not typically the kind of projects that we see. So the potential negative impact of these prefabricated structures without any front doors on the street, which could contribute to the pedestrian experience, is a concern, but this project is not set up to actually necessarily invite somebody walking down the sidewalk, as I said, to come in. So you will see that I provided two entirely different possible paths for you all to consider. One path deals with supporting the project and addressing what they need variances from, and then a time frame. And as I said, there is a concern about the time frame. If that's the path you go, they really want to extend it out. I believe they wanted another 5 years in there, if I'm not mistaken, to 2035. And I'm going to write that down. Just from the standpoint of the timing of getting your permits and preparing the site and getting it up and running is not tomorrow. So, and in that case, you would also have to provide a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. The other path would be if you feel that this is not appropriate in the Downtown Design District for whatever reasons you all want to include, which could be the height, setback issues. I provided those potential recommendations for you. So do you have questions for me?
Yeah, I think really it's mechanism for, we've done it for parking lots. We've done it for signage here for a timeline. It sounds like you've also done it for a temporary building for schools, which I'm assuming it was for John Rex for a
Oh, no,
middle
this was
school
in
built?
River. This
Okay.
was, down off Exchange.
Okay. I'm assuming because of a school was being renovated and there was a timeline, or do you remember what was
Yeah,
for?
they got overcrowded and they said we need it for this time frame, and so, yeah.
Okay. But is there a mechanism for this committee, Board of Adjustments, to reinforce after a timeline, hey, this needs to be demolished?
This committee can't do anything that's arbitrary or capricious. And to pick a date, December 31st of 2030 is just a guess. It sounds arbitrary to me.
Okay.
So I would counsel against having a sunset provision. Either it's appropriate or it's not. To say it's appropriate now, but it won't be appropriate in 10 years sounds arbitrary to me. But to answer your question, the enforcement mechanism would be to file for injunctive relief in 10 years.
Okay. Any more comments for staff?
This would be reviewed under the commercial code. It's not a residence. So we're talking about public pool and all the requirements that are going to be associated with that. I think it's going, when the health department gets a hold of how to protect that pool from someone who is here for a period of time or a child, I think it's going to start to impact this site plan, or I'm questioning, is it going to start impacting this in a manner that then, okay, this is going to be different than what we're talking about today?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the architect or somebody from his office had reached out to permitting because they came to me about this and said that they were going to withhold their comments until after your action. There is a reference on the plans themselves that you might have noticed dealing with, let's see what page that's on. It's on page A1, where they comment, the structures will not be constructed in a manner that classifies them as mobile homes, because that was also discussion, because they're not allowed downtown. And I thought there was a reference somewhere that talked about the building code that what they were designed under. I thought that was on here.
IBC/IRC. I mean, it's they're not single-family dwellings, they're transitory. It's going to be, the state health department's going to say that this needs to go under a commercial pool.
Right. Ken Fitzsimmons, task design architect. Yes. Since in the beginning when we did talk to permitting the 8th floor, before we moved to the hotel use, they reviewed it, I mean, just from a conceptual standpoint to tell us commercial versus residential, how you would treat it. If zoning had allowed it as residential, then they would allow the buildings themselves to be reviewed under IRC, but everything else would have to be IBC, including the pathways up to the houses. Now that we're moving to strictly commercial, yes, they'll probably all have to be sprinkled. They'll have to do everything that you would do under IBC for a hotel. So we expect that. We've not had specific conversations about the pool, but we did anticipate that that's going to be something that will have to be addressed as well, the review there with the health department.
That answers my question there. I do have a little bit of concern about the fact that I think it's going to change some things. And I also, there's a lot of precedents that are being set here that are different. And I realize that the transitory nature of it may at least try to address those, but it's pretty different. The inward facing, everything that we speak to other applicants about, you want to activate the sidewalk and you want individuals engaged with what's happening at that ground floor level, and you want to do all this is very different than that.
Sure. That's why one of the things that we're trying to implement is the temporary. To address Dustin's comment, I would disagree in that, in our opinion at least, it's not arbitrary, because this is a date that we're coming up with. This isn't being imposed upon us. We are voluntarily allowing.
You're in agreement with that then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That makes a
Oh,
difference.
yeah, they're the ones that came to us with that
Correct.
proposal.
Yeah, if it was being imposed, but no, we're subjecting ourselves to the voluntary sunset of, no, we just want it to be 2035 to recoup some of the investment. In terms of the activation, one of the problems with this area is there's really nothing that's activated. Our hope is that something like this will seek to maybe kind of spur some additional development. We've got the bail bondsman to our west, kind of surrounded by parking lots. If you drive up and down Chartel, like I do every day, there's just not a lot going on here. I'm not sure if this doesn't get approved that something else is going to come along on this site. Our hope is that something starts to activate something along Chartel. The temporary nature hopefully can ease some of the concerns as it relates to what we're being asked to do here. So we do have the variances in terms of height. What the framework tells us is you have to look to the context of the surrounding developments. Here, the surrounding developments, I think a one-story, although less than the minimum, is in keeping with the context of the surrounding environment. And in the setback, it is a unique situation here because we do meet the setback as it relates to those first buildings, and the ones that are deemed accessory don't have to meet it. And if the other 5 were deemed accessory, they wouldn't have to meet it. So we have a bit of a unique situation, which is, of course, why we have variance process described in the statutes to address the unique nature of developments that don't fit within the perfect square of a municipal code. So we think it's a very unique, a very cool project that perhaps brings some life to an area that is otherwise dead. So I'd like him to kind of walk through some of the details of the project, but I wanted to address those variances and address the sunset provision. So if, you know.
I do have a follow-up question on the sunset provision. Are you requesting 2030 or 2035?
2035. We talked to
I
staff.
came up with 2030.
Okay. For a sunset provision, to make it more legally sound, it should match what they're asking for.
Well,
it would be easier to enforce
They
then.
just said temporary, so I just picked a date.
Okay.
So we would just change
It'd
that.
be 2035.
Yeah, and then is this from your CA, or is this from approval? What's the?
Well,
what do you
that's
think
why I
from a-
picked December 31st, 2035 was the date that I picked, because to me, that's
It's more
an
concrete.
end of a calendar year, that type of thing might
Sure.
make it easier to,
Yeah, I'm
with.
fine. I'm fine with the whatever the end date at the end of the year. I'm asking, is that from approval of this body, or is that from?
I think we're just
you're
saying-
permitting your the start date, right?
I don't think the start date matters. I think the end date matters.
Okay.
And our proposal is December 31, 2035.
Okay.
And, you know, and that allows, because there will be some permitting and some things that'll undoubtedly pop up, we need enough time to recoup the investment.
so they're
one.
committing, they're saying if we get approved, we will have everything gone by December 31st, 2035.
It'll be a New Year's celebration.
Any other comments?
What I will just say is that once a CA is issued and then the work under the CA and the related building permit is completed and the CA expires, we have no mechanism for this. This is not something that our ordinance contemplates. It would be dependent upon code enforcement identifying a way to enforce an expiration date. And then just realistically, it would be dependent upon the city being willing to go that step and that length to enforce requiring someone to remove structures, which is a big ask. And I fully believe that the applicant intends to do this. I'm not saying that we don't trust them or believe them, but 10 years is a long time. They could win the lottery and move to the Bahamas and sell this to somebody else, and then the new owner says, I'm not tearing that down, I'm not moving those buildings. So it's just a challenging thing for us to put on paper as, a condition of the approval when we don't really have the structure in place to do this logistically.
So we discovered, we had a temporary basketball court. I forgot about Hudson and Reno.
Okay.
So we discovered with that and with the school buildings, that had all been approved before I came here, and nothing was set up. And I stumbled upon the basketball court one day and went, oh crap, that has expired. It is still there. They should have already come back and asked it for an extension. So they came in after the fact to ask for an extension, and ultimately the basketball court became permanent. Same way with the school buildings. I stumbled upon those. So there is a way, if we don't change our permit system, that I can set it up. But that's a big if at this point, because we're getting all kinds of new programs. So we'll try to set something up, but it's easy that it could slip through the cracks.
You know, there are applications that come before the Board of Adjustment that have time fuses on them, and they are, approved with time limitations. And so we're happy to work with staff to find a mechanism, but if everyone forgets, if the CA is a CA until a period of time, if on January 1, 2036, someone says, I don't like that, the city absolutely has the legal authority to say, your CA is expired, you are in violation of the ordinance, remove, or the city can go across the street and seek removal.
You probably have a way to craft something in the document that you provide. Since the idea is that on this side, we don't necessarily, not that we don't have a mechanism to enforce it, but it's self-governed, and if nobody is looking in that direction, it might fly by.
We can work with Dustin
But
in his office.
You could come up with something that you share in your document that says, no, this is the mechanism by which we're going to.
Sure.
You're creative.
Yeah, we can do that.
One last thing I just noticed. Once again, we have the street tree that you didn't like on the previous project. So I was just going to, do you have a problem with the Shantung maple?
We love maples.
Okay. Okay, so I was just trying to get ahead of that one.
Okay. Other thing is just having the precedent of building a single story in DTD. Does anyone have a concern with that?
Here's what I think about this project. You've got a massive parking lot to the south that feeds an office building that's very full all the time. You have a bail bondsman to the west that prints money and is going to be there until the jail moves, and then it's a negligible site. You have a parking lot to the east that supports a hospital. That's not going anywhere. I think it's a very cool and strange temporary activation of an underutilized site. And I am perfectly happy spending the next 10 years fighting bad ideas. But if someone's going to come up with an interesting way to use an underutilized site, I'm going to get them to do it.
Yeah, that's the way I feel too. I feel like that this is something that any place else I would be fighting against it, but this is the place in which you're allowing us to hear the word temporary, is giving us the ability to say, yeah, let's do this. And if it's super successful, it proves itself.
Okay.
Yeah. My last comment is, I think again, I echo their sentiments. I think it's a super cool project. I definitely want to see it happen at that location. Underutilized for a long time. I could definitely see myself staying there, a little staycation. So I would like to see it. So if there's anyone else in the gallery that wants to speak on this item.
I would just note that we might tweak the condition regarding the temporary nature to make clear that not only are, let me look at what it actually says before I say this.
It almost implies that they have until 2035 to put it in, and that's not what I meant.
Well, I would say, instead of saying that the certificate of approval is valid until December 31st, 2035, and I might defer to Dustin on wording for this, because that's not something that our ordinance lays out that we have the ability to do. So I would say that the condition is that staff and the applicant determine a method for enforcing a date of expiration to be included in the certificate of appropriateness, with that date being December 31st, 2035. And if we can't come to an agreement that we can do that and that it's valid, we come back to you.
David, why did you ask for a sunset provision?
Well,
Why
I think
wouldn't you just want it to be permanent?
It was something that we got the sense after talking that the height limits and the nature of the buildings, as you guys said, if we didn't have, if that provision was not in here, would you approve it?
I would definitely, if it was permanent, I would definitely want at least 30 feet on the street side.
Right. So the thinking is that our client has ideas in the future, hopefully to do something bigger and better with the site. But as we've talked about, it's a very underutilized site, and this is a good way to temporarily fill it in, hopefully recoup some of the investment, and give them time when the city matures a little bit, more things are happening around this, a different plan with more money will make sense.
I don't want to be armchair architect, but there could be a strategy of putting the 30-foot tall, geometry against the street frontage and permanently having this thing fit within the guidelines. Because I see the office, the restroom, and all of that on the south side, which makes sense because you think people will be driving to it. But people don't drive to alleys because that's complicated, so they'll probably end up at the front anyways because that's where Google Maps are going to take them. And so, arrival sequence could say you do a 2-story element on the front, it satisfies the requirement, we never have to sunset, and you could have this thing until 2040. But I know you've spent time developing it,
I don't think that's necessarily something that we have to solve today. If we're going to let them go with this and say it's temporary, they would have the ability to come back and say, hey, we did the math, and we're in flight, we've got all of our stuff in, but we're going to do this, and now we want to ask if our CA can be adjusted.
Agreed. I also agree with your point because I definitely see this as a project that could be, 1, more units, 2, 2-story, and could, I don't know what that cost looks like when obviously it goes up whenever you go to 2 stories, but anyway, something for you to decide and not me.
Yeah, our preference is to keep it as is, and perhaps in 10 years, the numbers are such that it makes sense to go two-story on the frontage, or perhaps the whole, or taller, but our preference is to keep it as is and sunset it.
Yeah.
And we're, like I said, we can draft the condition however the board sees fit, and we'll work with the city attorney's office to craft whatever both parties are comfortable with.
Cool. Are we comfortable with that condition that Katie has presented, and are you guys comfortable with that condition that Katie's presented as well? Sounds like you are.
Got a mechanism with the city attorney?
Yep.
I'm gonna draft a motion, but I'm gonna ask that your language be inserted at the appropriate time. All right.
Can you say your language again? See, I hate this. When I always say stuff from this podium and someone says, can you say it again? I never can, but I bet you can.
Probably not, but we recorded it, so.
Also true, we can reference that too.
And she's referring to the certificate of approval? Sorry, I just had to give her a hard time about that.
Did I say that? Did I
You
say
said appropriateness,
No.
yeah.
Okay.
At the front of my brain all the time. Yeah, that the applicant and staff and municipal counselor's office work to establish a method by which the sunset provision would be enforced, and that if that's not feasible, the application would return to the commission.
Perfect.
I'm going to move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant obtains variances from the Board of Adjustment from the regulation requiring a minimum height of 2 stories or 30 feet, and from the regulation requiring buildings to be located within 10 feet of the property line at the street right-of-way, and that the applicant, municipal council, and staff will work together in order to develop the language that would be included in the CA that it defines how the sunset mechanism is going to be narrated, annotated, authored, and with the end date of December 31st of 2035.
And that street trees will be revised.
Trees will be revised to
Shantung
be
maples.
Shantung maple, ace or something.
Big day for the maple tree here.
I'll second.
Eric. Thank you.
Okay,
And I'll
motion
provide a
passes.
recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustments for a variance from the regulation requiring a minimum height of 2 stories or 30 feet, and from the regulation requiring buildings to be located within 10 feet of the property line at the street right-of-way.
Thank
Okay,
you.
motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, I
Okay,
appreciate it.
next we have DTCA-25-00025 at 12 and 14 East Park Place.
Hello again. At your last meeting, this item was on your agenda, and you actually continued it until the June 20th meeting because you were wanting them to provide a structural report, and at the time, they didn't think they'd be able to get it done. Well, they got it done, and they got it to me by the deadline of the following Tuesday, and so we re-advertised this item to notify the property owners within 150 feet as though it was a new application. In your packet, the structural report is attached, and there were some minor tweaking in the staff report just to add information that was from that structural report. It still also contains everything from the first meeting, which is, in a nutshell, staff feels both of these buildings are historic resources and architectural resources. They have been open to the elements for a while. The current owner has not owned them very long. He bought them in this condition. But they're kind of cool structures. You now have, and that's kind of interesting there with the contemporary in the background, and you now have some pictures from the inside of the building. Cody was here at the last meeting, and he's here again. So staff still has the same 2 possible avenues for you to go. if you determine that they are historic resources and architectural resources, and that the structures do not present an imminent threat to public health and safety, or that the proposed or anticipated future development does not outweigh the loss of the structures, then the recommendation would be that you deny the application. However, if you determine that the structures are not historic or architectural resources, that the structures pose an imminent threat to public health and safety, or that the proposed or anticipated future development outweighs the loss of the structures, then that recommendation would be to approve it. There was a small presentation, and I've still got that here, so Cody can reference it. Again, for potential, they obviously, as he said, did not have, it's not a completed project yet. They haven't had it that long. They're kind of, researching different things. But, and I'll just, do you have questions for me, or I can just let him come up?
Nope, I don't have any questions. Do you have,
you wanna
anyone
drive?
has any questions?
Okay.
Never been up here with nobody behind me. It's kind of strange. So, as Laura mentioned, yeah, we're still continuing to look at future potential uses. As of just yesterday, we had a third potential
Can you
option.
identify yourself?
Oh, sorry.
For those watching
Yeah.
from home.
Cody Pistolica, Miller Architecture and Development, 11 Northwest 10th Street. We actually, just as of yesterday, had a third potential possibility come up for this. No designs on that one beyond what we showed you last time. This one might be more of a 5-story concept, but we are definitely actively marketing this and looking at design options for this site. The fence has now come down from the old substation, so site cleanup is commencing. I'll just kind of click through that. Just as I said, this is the same as what we had at last month's commission. But there's the fence that is now down. You can see the house in the background there. The Indian Motorcycle Building, which is staying. It's
Yes,
very nice
please.
structure.
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Our office, which is just next door. And then again, this is just one of the 3 potential concepts that we're exploring, which would be, I think, regardless of which one we end up with, or in any case, a mixed-use facility, we are thinking structured parking. On Park Place, that street is now a cul-de-sac, kind of. It dead ends at the railroad. I think we would like to figure out a way to reestablish the street grid there if possible. But as of right now, it's kind of contributes to the security issues we're having with it because it is such a hidden area that people kind
And
of
just as a
congregate in.
reminder how that happened, that was part of the quiet zone project dealing with the railroads, which resulted in the city having to cut off several crossings across the railroad track. And in this area, there were, I think, 3. So you can get across at 10th and you can get across at 13th, and everything in between was eliminated so that they would agree to not have horns, no train horns between certain hours. And so that's how we lost that crossing.
Yeah.
And gained tremendous amounts of opportunity to develop around the train tracks.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, it creates some really odd little areas back there, and currently this is one of them. So, as Laura mentioned, we were able to get a structural engineer out there, so he and I walked both the house itself and the accessory garage. On the interior, we found that not only do we have a lot of tenants there that we keep chasing out, we were actually trying to get it boarded up right after that meeting, and then within a day or so, the metal building that is coming down, we had locked that up, the locks were cut off, so it's everything we put up gets torn down. It looks like been a whole lot of people inside there, so we're doing our best to keep it safe, but it's, like I said, there's only so much you can do when people are determined to get in. The condition of the structure itself, I think you guys have some of those photos, but ceilings are exposed, some walls are exposed in areas. We found that the wood structure itself, most likely because of the roof, is now pretty suspect. The floor plates are tilting, and so the damage over the last few years of this being unoccupied and not kept up, basically led our structural engineer to come to the conclusion that salvaging this, you can't just rebuild it. You would basically have to start from scratch and try to replicate it. He did not feel comfortable with just trying to brace it and fix some of these issues because they're kind of throughout the structure.
Any questions for the applicant? There is no one in the gallery to speak on this.
Yeah, feels strange.
Yeah.
I mean, where I was last month there was no structural report. The structural report has been provided by a real local structural engineer that does real work that I know, and has said that it is an imminent threat due to high wind, potential fall. So for me, that has changed how I think about this thing, and I recognize it is historic adjacent, but also in poor condition.
Sure. And I don't think that that specific location, because of the railroad and the vacation of that street, Park Place, that it will become residential again and not the highest and best use. So I'm okay with this project or the demolition of this.
I'll move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report.
I'll second.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, next we have DTCA-25-00030 at 423 Southwest 13th Street. Laura?
So I have a question at this point. We have not heard from this applicant, who's for this case and the next case. And so, as you saw, there was recommended conditions and all kinds of things, and I know that without an applicant here, I don't know if the best thing to do is just go through the presentation and discuss this after that, or?
I believe staff is requesting a continuance, right?
Yes, with specifics for information that is necessary that has not been provided to us.
Okay. I don't see why we can't just go ahead and vote on the continuance then.
Okay, yeah, I think that was going to be my intent as well.
Okay, and I'll save conversation. Hopefully the next time we have it before you, we will have the information that we need.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, and so the recommendation was to continue it to the,
July.
was it July?
What's that date?
The July 17th
17th, there we go.
meeting.
I'll move to continue item E to the July
To the July 17th.
date.
I'll second.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank
I'll
you.
move to continue item F to the July 17th date.
Second.
We're moving quickly. Thank you, Keith. Okay, motion passes. Okay, next we have other business, electing officers.
So last year, I didn't do this because I thought within a month or two, we were going to have some new bodies on this, and Tony wasn't going to be here, and we're going to, and as you know, that hasn't happened yet. So I'm like, okay, we've got to have it on, even if things stay the way they are. We really need to have it on because we skipped last year, so. And I'll just remind everyone, the only one missing is Mariana, and I always joke with people, if you don't show up when we're electing offices, you need to realize what can happen.
That's true.
But
Very true. Okay. Does anyone want to be chair?
Come on, Eric.
Mr. Smith,
Would you like to be chair?
how long have I been chair?
The only thing
I
that,
thought the rumor was that the vice chair slides up into
well,
chair.
here's the reason why I think that you would be a great chair, is because the chair gets the last say. it gets the ability, all the commentary happens, and then, because you will typically bring,
You
you
historically,
will listen, you do, and you carry the most weight when you make that statement. So I think it'd be a good chair, and I would like for Mariana to be the vice chair. Think that it would be good for her to sit, because you've already served.
Vice Chair.
Are you wanting to be chair?
Well, I don't care. I'm happy anyway.
It can't be me.
It can't be me.
and so obviously, can I ask this question of, in the events that we do have more members, do we need to do this process again?
Well, I was curious if at some point in the next few months, when we have our full 9-member commission, I guess that could be something that's discussed about.
I think you just need a quorum to elect officers.
Yeah, I mean, it's down to be in May every year,
Yeah.
but that's not to say it can't happen some other time because of something that changes.
Okay.
One of our reasonings for going forward with it now is that even if we had several new people, we would most likely be electing someone who'd already served and was familiar with the commission to be chair and to be vice chair. So it would be most likely one of you all anyway.
Okay.
Vice chair? Okay.
Boom. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Was that a
make-
motion that I heard from
I'm
Tony?
gonna make a motion that Kayla move to chair and that Eric move to vice chair.
Can I second that?
Do we,
I can second. I have to second.
you
that.
can second.
Yeah, I have to
You did
second
second,
that.
okay.
Yeah. Perfect. I
So
did
we had
second that.
Kayla, Justin was second. So we have Kayla chair, Mariana vice chair.
No.
Eric.
Oh, Eric, I'm so sorry. Eric, vice chair.
We
Okay,
love it.
so I guess we have do we have to vote them separately?
Oh, yes.
So we're voting right now on Kayla being the chair,
Correct.
okay?
I'm gonna have to really work on my conflict resolution.
Okay, that motion passes. Congratulations.
Okay, so
And electing vice chair,
Make a motion that Eric Schmidt become vice chair.
Brandon, second.
How long is that for? Oh,
You still pass.
Too bad.
Congratulations. Motion passes. Okay, perfect. Starts right now. Communications. Item number 8, communications.
So we have
Several.
several administrative approvals.
And it sounds like that we have multiple signage for playoffs.
Say that again?
Signage for playoffs.
Oh, they're the super graphics.
Yep.
We've got super graphics on buildings we've never had before. And I mean, not only do we have them on the Omni, now we have them on the convention center,
That's awesome.
which I think is kind of exciting. I don't, if you have any questions, there's several administrative approvals that are in here, in addition to the super graphics, and concerts. So it's not on here yet, but I just did the one for the Stevie Nicks concert. So don't forget, Stevie Nicks is also coming to town.
Perfect.
They also have John Rex is doing renovation in the building on California that the city owns, which is very exciting to me. They're taking what had been like the garage area, and that's going to become classrooms. So they're growing by leaps and bounds. So, and that's going to morph into,
More comments.
we are hopefully anticipating that we will have information for you very soon.
Yes, so I'll say we have been working actively on updating our list of folks from previous commissions that had expressed interest in moving to another commission. You will see, I think, on this Tuesday's council meeting, lots of appointments, not to our bodies, but to other ones. So there's
Movement there.
movement there. So we are hoping to start seeing some appointments to this commission and to Urban Design Commission as well in the near future. So we'll keep you updated on that. I was going to mention one other thing. Laura, did you have anything else that was from planning staff? Just that
I don't
assume
think
we have
so.
a meeting? Okay.
I don't think so.
This is just, you all work with historic buildings. We see historic buildings, we see historic tax credit projects, and if you haven't followed this in the news, 2025 funding for state historic preservation offices has not been released, and funding for state historic preservation offices in 2026 is $0. So that's National Register nominations, that's historic tax credit projects, that's grants that we receive and many other cities and nonprofits receive to do preservation work. So just want you guys to be aware that that's happening, and you can do with that information what you want.
And that's also the funding for the SHPO office.
Yeah, our SHPO had a meeting for certified local governments this week and said they're funded through basically the end of the summer, and then they'll close their doors if something doesn't change. So on that happy note.
On the happy note.
Sorry.
No,
That's really sad.
it's
Yeah.
beyond sad. Any comments from commission members? I'm excited for our new appointments. Done a phenomenal job over the past few years, so excited to see them excel.
And thank you, Justin, for serving as chair
Yeah.
for
Great
the
long
extended amount of time that
Yeah.
you did.
It's been fun.
Great job.
Thank you. Our next commission meeting is Friday, June 20th, 2025. New applications were to be submitted to staff by 4 p.m. on Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. Revisions and information on continued projects are to be submitted by Tuesday, May 20th, 2025, and we are adjourned.
So just remember that